Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at password import inline hook with Okta. Um, uh, if we think of a scenario where an organization maintain its own application and the database to authenticate the users and store the database credentials, sorry, store the user's credentials in the database in an encrypted format, and the organization wants to migrate all the users' details as well as the credentials over to Okta when they set up a new Okta environment. In that case, as the database is stored as encrypted format, and if the encrypted format is not supported by Okta, how we can migrate those passwords. That's where the password import inline hook comes into play. So using the password inline hook, how we can do is like instead of just copying over the credentials, we use API to use uh, to verify the password against the old system with a minimal code. Let's quickly jump into hands-on how we can configure it. So if we see, we have Okta developer account, which I showed like how to create the developer account and how to create the users in my previous videos. And if we quickly jump into the uh, inline hooks to give an introduction, we have like different type of inline hooks: registration, summon inline hook, token inline hook, and password import inline hook. Today we are going to focus on the password import inline hook. I already have set up one password import inline hook to demonstrate, but you also can configure it as I show along. So first of all, um, we have list of users in Okta. Maybe we created those users directly in Okta. We imported the users via like APIs or CSV files, or we synced from other systems to Okta, or users created themselves against Okta, and those users from created from various different sources are listed under these users, and we wanted to migrate or bring the password from the database to certain users who are migrated from only that system, not for the users who directly signed up or like newly created via different sources. So for example, let's take this Isaac Brook is the new user who got imported from our old system, old database system to here, and we wanted to migrate his password over here. Here I'm not able to demonstrate like how we have integrated with the other system because I have lack of environment to configure, but I can show you how we configure the password inline hook in this scenario. So for example, if you open the user uh, and see the user details, and this is the Okta user Okta Rockstar plugin I have used to view the full user details, uh, but also you can check all of these details via the Postman Get Users API. And here, when you focus on the provider, which says Okta by default, um, but this can be from various other systems, like for example, if it is connected to an Ldap system, then it will show as provider is Ldap. And if it is like, for example, Salesforce user, it would show as Salesforce. But in this scenario, like we wanted to tell Okta that for these these kind of users, we wanted to import the password via the password inline hook, and don't do that for other users. Like for example, like if it is connected to Salesforce, we don't want to import the password to Okta. We always wanted to do the just-in-time authentication. So how to tell Okta that this user needs a password import from other system? So how we can tell Okta that this user need to import the password is by setting this provider as import. So that's the flag Okta knows when the user try to authenticate for the first time. I mean, like first successful authentication, it will say this is import, and it will trigger the password inline hook. So let me show you how we can make it import here. So here I have configured the Postman API to make the relevant change. So when we consider the user's post API, and we can play around with the body based on what and where we want to change. So like usually, like we checked in our previous videos how we can update the user profile details, like for example first name, last name, and how we can update the password and all. In this scenario, we wanted to update the credential section, which we saw here. This is part of the credential, and provider, credential provider should be import. So how we can set here is that like we will only set the credential if this is the main JSON body, and inside that focus on the credential, and we want to enable the password hook and user. And I have already set up this ISAC for mailinator.com user to enable this password inline hook, and I also have configured the environment and everything. Let me trigger this. Before that, I can show you how this user looks via the Postman API, and there is no body, and this is the user we want to search for. And when I send the request, it shows this provider is Okta. But now when I enable the password hook, um, this is now import. This is the exact same results as get user when the response comes in, but I can check again here. This is shown as import, and I can show here as well. This is marked as import. This is when Okta knows when this ISAC for mailinator.com user logs in against Okta. Okta knows where to look for this password. In this case, this is import, meaning like it has to import the password via the inline hook. How we can configure the inline hook? So we configure the inline hook from the workflow, inline hooks, and password inline hook. So here what we can do is like we can click on the password inline hook and like configure the name, URL, and everything. Since I have already configured this, I can just open and show you. So I have set the name, like we can, this is the type password import that is populated by default when we choose. And this is the name I have given, which hook it should be called for. And this is the API URL. This is where we have to focus more. This is the URL it will call. This is the API URL, and this is the post endpoint. Um, and we can configure the authentication headers as well in order to protect this API, or if the API is protected based on based on some custom headers, or based on some authentication fields. Like for example, we can send some tokens or some API keys uh, uh, in the header, so that the API under this URL can verify the request. But to make the thing simple, I just configured like a random value here, but my API is not protected at all, just to make it simple. But if you are doing it in your actual environment, like if you are implementing it for your organization, you must protect this API and configure the relevant headers here. Okay, let's dive into the actual API. This is just a post API with some URL. And to create the API, I have just used the already existing glitch endpoint to use in this case, so that like I don't have to host it anywhere, because this will give a ready-made endpoint to talk to, a public endpoint to talk to. And this like let's focus on the API, and I have created a Node.js uh, password import API with the endpoint and request response, and with the response structure as required. Let me come to this portion later. First, I will explain like what I'm trying to simulate here. Here, I'm not trying to simulate anything in this API. This will be the exact API you also will be implementing, implement some endpoint to receive some request and verify the credentials using maybe a validate method, and respond as per the format what Okta or the inline hook is expecting. So, but in my scenario, like I don't have an external system configured to show like this is the user base. Instead, to simulate this validate or mock this validate method, I have just hard coded some users into the code base itself with their passwords. This is these are just test users, so I don't worry about showing the password. So nothing will go wrong here. Um, yeah. So when the user is trying to log in for this isaac4 at mainlinear.com user, Okta knows this is the user uh, which needs password import via the inline hook. And when the inline hook is triggered, this inline hook knows this is the endpoint it has to trigger or pass the username and the password to verify whether it's correct or not. And in this request, I will receive the username and password, and I will verify against the um, database or whatever the credential management system I have, whether this password is correct. As you know, the password is encrypted in the system, but we always can verify whether the password we have is correct with the encrypted password by encrypting the current password and matching whether those values are correct or not. Okay, so how I implemented this one? Simple. Okta always provides the documentation with all the details, and in this case they have provided the uh, implementation details as well, how we have to implement the inline hook post API. And they also have this is similar to the one I have, and they have provided the mock users password and how we verify, and what should be the API validation logic looks like. So when we implement the API based on any language of our choice, but they have given the Node.js as the example, but we also can use Java, Python, or any language to implement the API. As long as this is the REST API, Okta should be able to talk to, and as long as it obeys the rules, request, and response format. So here, they have provided receive the credentials and verify whether that is correct, and if that is correct, respond the exact same body as mentioned, otherwise response to O4. This is a 200 response. Okta not only will check for the 200 response, but also will check for the response body. Excuse me. So is the exact copy has been placed here to respond, and let's check how we can import the password. So going back to the user whose password inline hook or import password import is enabled via the inline hook, and who will trigger the import or inline hook process? The user, the end user himself, because he knows the password, but we don't know the password. So when he enters the password against Okta, Okta will verify against the inline hook, which means like verify against the old system. Um, and once the password the user entered is correct, meaning like when the inline hook responds success, Okta knows the password is correct, and it will store the password inside Okta. Let's try. So in order to know the password, like user knows the password, but to simulate the password, I assume this is the password for the ISAC4 user, and oh, I have already logged in, and let me, yeah, this is 4@.com, and first I'm going to just try the random password and see what's happening, whether the user is able to log in or not. No, the user is not able to log in, assuming the password is wrong. And one more thing I wanted to show in the, oops, sorry, I also want to show the user as well as the logs. So when the user try to authenticate with the incorrect password, this never updated, and when I see the logs, it shows that incorrect credentials. This is the timestamp I was trying to do. And here inline hook is executed successfully. The API was triggered and the API responded, but responded with incorrect credentials. So Okta is not able to log in that user. Now I'm going to paste the exact same password as in the database or as in our mock, and now trying to log in. Phew. This time the user got logged in because the user used the correct password, but Okta didn't have the password. It called the inline hook. See, we can see this was the previous failure response but this is the last one. Second API triggered. It was able to call the inline hook successfully, and since the login since it returns success response mentioned here verified, it was able to import the password. Not actually, it's not importing the password. As long as the password is verified success, it will store the password which the user has entered in Okta in Auth API, and then following the usual process as the login and policy evaluation and app login and everything. This is the usual login process, and these are the two additional steps happen as part of password import. So here this This was import before, and let's see what is it now. It's Okta now, because now Okta stores the password. And when the user try to log in for the second time, it will not call the inline hook, it will authenticate internally. That also we can um, try and see. sec4@mailinit.com, and it's the same password I'm entering in order to log in, and the user is logged in, and let's refresh and see. So now this was the logout which I did before I log in, and user is directly logged in against Okta. There is no password InlineHook API call here. But if we check the previous logs, it triggered the password InlineHook and everything. And user login to Okta success is the third step here, and is the same step happen here after the password is once the password is imported to Okta. Yeah, one more step I just wanted to see here is I haven't checked. I'm just going to check whether it shows any metrics or not. It shows 0 successful execution and 1 unsuccessful. Most probably this metrics is not up to date, and maybe like when we check it later it will show the stats like how many passwords has been successfully imported, and how many failed. uh, yeah, how many failed. Yeah, that's it about the password import inline hook. And if you have any questions, I'll leave it in the comment. I will try to uh, uh, respond to you, or I will try to correct in my upcoming videos. Thank you so much.